Hello, this is video number 328. Nice day here today, but it's pretty humid. It's getting warmer again, like summer's not over here, so it's going to be in the 80s the next few days. And it's pretty humid right now. Not a lot of rain, but some rain. Went over to the Giant to get the newspaper. It was pretty uneventful. Haven't had many episodes going over there lately. I did a workout this morning before I went over to the Giant, so that I can eat more today. Eli duty today. This morning was interesting. He was pretty good this morning, actually. He got some balls and stuff out, and he wanted me to juggle them. So there was a day when I could actually juggle. When I got them out, it took me a little while, but it was starting to come back how to juggle 3 balls. He got a kick out of that. And I wasn't doing it very well yet, but he got a real kick out of that. He was trying to juggle 1 ball, so we played checkers. We played a game of checkers. He got his Mario Brothers checkers out, and we started playing sort of like for real. But then, whenever you jump one of his men, he goes insane. And then it got to be like we were just messing around, and he ended up with most of the checkers. So he's still not to the point where you can really play a game seriously with him. And if you play seriously, if you win, you're going to have trouble probably. He's getting better at things. He's getting better. We were watching cartoons, Looney Tunes. And there was this one cartoon on that was I think it was Tom and Jerry, like the cat and the mouse, but there were ducks in it too. And there was this mother duck, and she had like 5 or 6 ducklings. And it showed her getting in the water and swimming, and all of the ducklings got in except the very last one couldn't swim. So it didn't go in the water, and its family swam away, and it's still there. So Tom was the cat. Jerry saw it, and throughout the cartoon, Jerry actually taught the duck to swim. Okay, but not in the way, not with its padded, its webbed feet. It swam like using its wings like a human swings, like the arms. Its wings were like its arms. So at the end, it showed the duck got in the water, and it was at the end swimming, but not the way the other ducks were. So it kind of spoke to me it was still swimming, it just did it differently. And it's sort of like how people are, I think. There are lots of ways to be as a human being to accomplish the same kinds of things. And some of us do it differently. I think of Eli, he's a different sort of person. And then I was thinking further on that. Tuesday, my wife meets with some other women. They sit and discuss. Sometimes they read a book and discuss it some, or sometimes they'll just sit and talk about some things in their life. And she was concerned about Eli and his behavior and this and that. And one of them, whose daughter teaches kindergarten, asked, "Have you taken him to the doctor?" Implying have you considered drugging him? And that was kind of disturbing. I'm thinking kids don't need drugged. I mean, that was just disturbing. Put him on Ritalin and numb him and make him somebody he's not. That was disturbing. I don't know why that is so pervasive now in this society. It's just let's give somebody a drug so that they will behave in the way we want them to, or whatever. I don't know. It's almost like she's thinking more of her daughter, well, the kids should be on drugs to make them behave and then be easier for her, the teacher. Well, that's no way to go about, treating people. But anyway, the cartoon made me think of that. Made me think of Eli. Eli's the one that he'll get there, but he's just going to get there in a different kind of way. He's a different kind of person. But he was really good this morning. He got the teacher wrote on his paper yesterday, "A great day," so that was pretty good. We have Eli duty tonight again to get him off the school bus, and then we'll probably go to Peachtree Restaurant, and I'll get my chicken nachos. Had them last Friday. Excellent. I love those things. So that's probably what we'll do tonight. And then Friday, tomorrow, we have off. His dad's going to be home in the morning. He'll put him on the bus, and then his mom will be home in the afternoon to take him off. So that's good. Last night out with Harold. This was real interesting. He picked me up like always, got in his vehicle. We went out here and got out of the development. He turned left. He didn't even ask me where I might want to eat. And we're traveling along, and we don't usually go in that direction. That's like all of the Asian restaurants that we go to are the other way. So we're going along talking about like music and stuff. I think we're talking about Van Morrison. He knows somebody like in their 20s who's really into Van Morrison, which I found rather interesting. So we're driving along, and he pulls into Gilligan's, a nice restaurant, you know. We get out of the vehicle and we go inside, and we sit at this little table. And I have my back to the door, and he's facing the door. And then the waitress comes like to take our drink order, but he had already gone to the restroom. So she gets my order and that, and brings him some water. And he comes back, and he's looking at his cell phone. It's just very strange. He wasn't saying anything. And I'm sitting there, and I'm about to tell him his sister in South Carolina, the one that had the family reunion back in July, I think it was, she had sent me a card a few days ago, just a couple sentences about something or other, about, what'd she say? Take care of Dawn first and then the rest of the world, or something like that. And I was about to tell him about that. It was like the words were right there, and then I feel this hand on my back, like, and it started rubbing my back, like, this felt pretty nice actually. I thought, oh, well, who is this? And I thought it was like, I don't know, somebody that I knew probably in the area. And so like I look up and I look to my left, and like it's his sister, Connie. Like she was right there in the restaurant. I was just about to tell him about this note. So anyway, she has this job where she goes around to libraries, and they have this, it's a software system kind of thing that they demonstrate to libraries and sell. And she was in the area about 45 minutes away, had well, I guess it was a meeting of different library, district libraries, and they were communicating with each other. There's different parts of the system, and they were kind of like telling each other about the system and so forth. But she was doing that, and she came up, and she actually was staying at a hotel in the area somewhere. And she sat down, and that was so cool. We probably talked for 2 hours, the three of us, and she's a storyteller. Harold's a storyteller. They're all storytellers. Really good at it too. But that was awesome. That was awesome to see her, because I was in South Carolina. It was a lot of fun down in Anderson. She said that when she left, I think it was Monday morning, that the night before her power went out completely, like for the whole night. And she had to get up at 4 in the morning and drive to the airport in I think Greensville, and how it was like really dark and this and that. And she had no electricity, and she made it through her flight and everything, but she has no idea what she's going to find when she gets home. But all of her power was out, so that was interesting. She should be home. She's probably not home yet in a few more hours, and probably hear what's going on there. But I was just shocked. I didn't even know what to say. Like I looked at her, and I looked over at Harold, and I just kind of like, I was dumbfounded. And that's pretty unusual for me anymore. I usually have something to say. So that was nice. I liked that. And then we went to Harold's, and we listened to a couple jazz CDs, and then we watched some videos on his laptop, some comedy videos, and we came home. I came home. Okay, you will notice when you're listening to me right now, but beside the video of mine is another one. It's a song by Mary Saitoli. It's called "Pick Me Up," and I think at the very end of the video, it says "For the many who need healing" or something like that. So I thought it was like a pretty good video to put on here. She has gotten off of everything. She's in withdrawal. She's gotten off of everything but Phenibut or however you want to say it. So she's had a lot of good window time. Lately she's had some wave stuff going on, but it's a really cool song. I like it. Hope you like it too. It's on Vimeo. I always download to or upload to YouTube, but this one is on Vimeo. So I hope you like it. Okay, I have a Facebook message, and and email, they're kind of like the same sort of thing. I wasn't sure how to talk about these exactly. They have to do with fear, basically. And my theme, as you have seen, is instead of fearing what it might be, face what it is. Okay, in withdrawal, there's fear of like all kinds of different things. And so what I will do is I will talk about this general subject, but add a number of things here and there. It has to do basically with the things that you hear and read from others. A lot of them are in withdrawal, a lot of them aren't in withdrawal, but they have things to say to you. It has to do with like the forums, the withdrawal forums and Facebook groups that, I mean, there's validation in those groups for sure, in the forums, but you really got to be careful, as I've talked about many, many times. So I'll start with the Facebook message, and then the email is extensive. It's actually 2 emails from the same person. And I'll have to skim my way through it. There are things I probably don't want to read. Okay, the Facebook message, Don, do you think we'll always be vulnerable to a wave since our brain was injured? Okay, one person said we will be disabled for life. Okay, when someone says you're going to be disabled for life, whenever someone makes an absolute statement about anything having to do with withdrawal other than we are healing. You are healing. I mean, that's a given, because you're alive, your brain is healing, it's trying to find its way through this mess. But other than that, there's very, very little that you can say with any absolute statement like we will be disabled for life. You know, what does that mean? And that's not true. It's obviously not true. But the question itself is, will we always be vulnerable? To some degree, yes, I think we will be, but everyone is. To me, the greatest vulnerability for me personally, and I think for most people, don't have anything to do, or at least be extremely cautious about things that can affect GABA receptors. Like the benzos, you absolutely do not want to take a benzo, a Z drug, because they bind to the GABA receptors. You know, that's bad news. You don't want to take a fluoroquinolone because that interacts with GABA receptors in a similar fashion, apparently. And then you know, I've talked about alcohol and other kinds of things that you would need to be really cautious about. We're all different. Maybe some people can drink some after they're well. I don't know. I mean, I can't, because I was an alcoholic, so that's an out for me anyway. I can't do that. So there's that, and those things I'm very careful about. I am careful about. So I'm very vigilant in that way. Now, other things, I think extreme stress and like to the point of trauma, I think is bad news too. Like stay away from stuff like that. Like for me, I've talked about this recently because of Dr. Jennifer. Do not exceed your limits as far as like stress goes. And I'm not talking about a little bit of stress in your life. I handle stress really, really well. But there are certain kinds of things that, like if I spend too much time doing this, and it's not so much that it's so much work, it's more, this is like very mental, emotional kind of work. It's very emotional. People, I mean, you know how sick you are, and then I get to message with a lot of people who are very sick. There are many of you. It's not just a handful. There's quite a few actually. But I'm just trying to point out that it gets to be stressful, and you're vulnerable in that respect, that you have to pull back. You have to know when to pull back. But that's true of anybody, even people who have not gone through withdrawal. We all have limits. We all have them. I don't think I'm any more cautious now than I have been before benzos even. I'm just more, I don't want to go back into that place where I was in withdrawal. I don't want that to happen. So there are certain things, I go ahead and do certain kinds of things, but I can feel like, okay, this is not going to take me into a good place. I'm going to back off for a while. So it's kind of like that. I don't think, it's not like we have to, you know, go around walking on eggshells like that. That's not the way it is at all. But anyway, you know, whoever said like we're going to be disabled for life, that's ridiculous. That's something you should not give any kind of credibility to whatsoever. Okay, now the email is along a similar line, and there's a lot here. It's written pretty long. Some of it I will probably skip. And this is from someone who has been on the various in the groups and on forums and this and that, seeing YouTube videos. Almost nothing good can come from the videos and the things in the forums other than validation, because people say a lot of things that they don't know what they're saying. They don't. So I'll read through this and make comment as I go. 15 minutes. Okay, Dawn, all of these comments were taken off of YouTube videos that I saw in one day from only watching 3 videos. There's all kinds of videos out there. There's like probably hundreds of videos on benzos now. Some are really excellent, people who have healed, and some are really, really bad, people giving advice that is absolutely not correct. But everybody has the freedom to do a YouTube video and make it public, and there's a lot of danger there. There is. Anyway, 1. A person recently met through YouTube, developed tics by his mouth from taking Xanax. He now has permanent tardive dyskinesia and has to live with his horrible affliction for the rest of his life. Okay, now this particular young lady who wrote this email to me, she has movement symptoms in her face. Okay, so first of all, I've mentioned this many times, this person has permanent TD. Well, how do you know that? I mean, anyone who says something with that's an absolute statement about any of these symptoms, there's no way to prove any of that. What is permanent? I've talked about that. What is the definition of permanent? So you can't, anyone who says that, you can't prove that. Could it be permanent? I don't know. I mean, nobody knows. That's the whole thing. There is so much uncertainty in all of this. You can't make absolute statements like that. Can somebody develop tics from taking a benzo? Sure, I'm sure they can. There's all kinds of symptoms people get just from taking the benzo. Maybe at first, like the benzo seems to help, but then later it seems a lot of people start to have a lot of health issues because of the benzo itself. Okay, so that one, like, how do you know something is permanent? I mean, my wife, she takes a antipsychotic. She's developed TD a few times, which a lot of doctors will say, well, that's permanent, that's irreversible. She's developed it 3 or 4 times. She cuts back or she stops taking Zyprexa for a while, and it goes away. It's not permanent. Okay, 2. What she's doing here is quoting things that she's heard or read. Okay, folks, many people are getting functional MRIs showing brain damage and being diagnosed with MS and autoimmune illnesses. Okay, okay, MRI showing brain damage. What kind of brain damage? Huh? What is the standard you use to determine what is brain damage? There is no standard. Being diagnosed with MS and autoimmune illnesses. How was that diagnosis made? Perhaps, and more than likely, if you're in benzo withdrawal, what is benzo withdrawal is being called MS or autoimmune illness. Are there autoimmune symptoms? Probably so. I'm sure there are. You can't, if you're in withdrawal, you can't, like, making other diagnoses is almost impossible unless it's from it's actual analytical data from a blood test or something. Other than that, it's all very, very subjective. Just looking at symptoms, and there are hundreds and hundreds of symptoms in withdrawal, you can't really make any kind of diagnosis with any certainty. It's just a guess. A lot of people who are in withdrawal are diagnosed with all kinds of other things when there's no way to know. A lot of us were in benzo withdrawal. They diagnose us as mentally ill. We have mental disorders. Well, when you are in withdrawal, you do appear to have mental disorders, that's for sure. I did, and many of you do. Okay, number 3. People who have reinstated after cold turkey have committed suicide. That's why we tell people not to do it. Okay, there is some validity to that. Cold turkey is not a good idea. I don't think it's ever really a good idea, because you go into acute withdrawal most of the time. Many people do, and that's a dangerous place to be, especially with respect to suicide. I was cold turkeyed in the hospital, and I was in a very bad place. I spent the Monday after I got out of the hospital trying to convince my brother-in-law who was here that it's okay to commit suicide because I didn't want to, but I was in such agony that, but you know, telling people not to cold turkey, more generally, you tell them that because you're going to have acute withdrawal symptoms and it's going to be hell on earth. I mean, it's hell on earth anyway, but that's another hotter level of hell. I don't know. Okay, number 4. Thousands of people are dying every year from this because their bodies and brains are giving out and shutting down. Okay, the people who are dying from this are the ones who cannot accept it and who give up hope. Those are the people who they take their own lives. Those are the people. Okay, and no one has to do that. It's hard to keep hope. That's why you search for positive places while you are in withdrawal. I've never heard of anybody's body just shutting down because they're in withdrawal. I've never heard of that. Brains are giving out. I'm not sure what that means. When you give up hope, I don't know if that's your brain giving out. It's just like you're weary and tired. You don't want to do it anymore. Okay, 5. I like this one. I am a scientist and came from a family of Holocaust survivors. I was given Klonopin and tapered to the point I could no longer taper anymore, and sustained brain damage evidenced through a QEEG, which is a quantitative electroencephalography or encephalogram, which shows electrical activity in the brain and parts that are not communicating properly. MRIs and CAT scans only show structural damage. I lost the ability to sleep. I can no longer dress or take care of myself. My life has been destroyed. Okay, the implication there is that if your brain, the parts of your brain are not communicating properly, then you're screwed, you're toast. Well, that's not true. Obviously, parts of the brain, when you're in benzo withdrawal, are not communicating properly. If they were, you wouldn't be sick. That's kind of a given. You don't have to even be a scientist to figure that one out. Electrical activity in the brain, that's what's going on. That's what your brain does. And it's interesting because this kind of goes with I think, like the 2 parts of the brain that I talk about in general, the cerebral cortex, which is like consciousness, that kind of thing, which supposedly came after the part in the center, the amygdala and the hypothalamus and all of those things that are inside. The cerebral cortex is around that part. Okay, supposedly, according to evolution, that's our reptilian brain. That's the part of the brain that was there first, and then later through evolutionary processes, if that's what you want to believe, the cerebral cortex came about, and that's your consciousness. But I'll talk more about that later. So I think the problem is the part of the brain that actually has been damaged, that has been injured by itself, like the brain sustained some stress, trauma, and did this thing to the fight and flight thing. So that's the amygdala, that's the sympathetic nervous system. That part of the nervous system is not communicating properly with the cerebral cortex, the rest of it. It's like, and when you're in withdrawal, for me, it was like I had 2 brains. I had the one part of the brain was terrifying the crap out of the rest of it. And the rest of it's just like shivering and shaking, like wanting to get things right, probably where it's trying to rewire, but you got the amygdala and that part terrifying the cerebral cortex. So you've kind of got it's like having 2 brains, really. They're not communicating, they're not working as one. They're kind of like, they're both freelancing, or at least the amygdala is freelancing and the sympathetic nervous system, and they're not getting together. I'll talk a little more about that later. Number 6, a YouTube video made by someone fighting with another Facebook group because he was trying to help someone. In the video, every word was an expletive. You people are MFs, crackheads, drug addicts. My Facebook group is positive, and we are all trying to get off this drug. All people are trying to stay on. I heard your group and admin are being investigated for a number of things. I mean, why would you call somebody those names if you're really trying to help people? That's ridiculous. I mean, it's obvious that like that group shouldn't even be together. That they don't really care about anyone. Everyone in their comments was cheering him on. I was in a group like that once with someone who, depending on, it had to do with faith. Like if you talked about a certain kind of faith, then you were ostracized, and people would cheer them on. It's let me see what else is there's something. Okay, number 7. I have been off Klonopin for over 10 years, and I'm still not the same or recovered. Okay, 10 years is a long time. Is it possible that someone could have some symptoms after 10 years? Probably so. I don't know. But you can't, I mean, we're all different. Everybody has their own story. Some people 10 years after, they still have symptoms. Perhaps so. This person says so, yes. That's possible, but that does not, you can't overlay somebody else's story on top of yours, because you will have your own story. Okay? I mean, is it possible for it to go 10 years? Is it possible for it to go 2 weeks? Yes. I mean, you don't know. Is it possible like in a year you could be well? Of course. It all depends. It's very genetic. Okay. 8. I did a slow, responsible taper and almost died multiple times from the horrifying side effects thereafter. Okay, and then a list of all the benzos symptoms followed. Okay, the side effects, I have never heard of anybody dying from a side effect other than like the depression and suicidal ideation. They took their own life. That's what, that's the danger in this. That's why I am here. That's why, it's important to grasp for hope. It's important to give hope if you can, because the danger is you give up and then you don't survive. It's you neither live nor win, according to Josie Wells, and that's just the way it is. And it is. If you stay alive, you will win. But if you don't stay alive, you're not going to win. So I have never heard of anybody being done in by the side effects themselves. I mean, they're miserable and they make you feel like you want to die, but I have never heard of anybody actually dying. Okay, 9. I reached out to someone about my symptoms. She was shocked and said, okay, this is the young lady mentioning her symptoms to someone. And this someone said, I've seen people with spasms and twitching, but not like you. You seem like you are in such distress. Are doctors helping? Do you have permanent, long-lasting damage? How would you know that? Why would you ask somebody that? Why would you say something like, and I know what she's talking about here. This reminds me of way back in 1997 when all the polydrugging started, and I was seeing a therapist. She had me do the Minnesota something or other test for depression, and she got my results. I remember doing the test. I was shaking. I was so depressed and panicky. She got my results back and said, "You're the most depressed person I've ever seen." Now, how that's supposed to help someone, I don't know. But for someone to say something like this, did you go to the doctor? I mean, it's the doctors that got us into this, honestly. You can't, not wise to say things like that. You just scare people, and you really have no clue what you're asking or saying, really. Because she says, here, and my favorite, he has been kicked off almost every forum. And I'm not even going to go into this. It says he has contact written to you, and yes, he has. I know this particular individual. It's ridiculous. Like, I'll talk about that later. Okay, let me see. Saying that outright lies being spread in the benzo community, especially Bayless, so that we heal. We do heal. It's just, I mean, people in withdrawal who say like we don't heal, or people, who, I mean, they're in withdrawal. How do they know? They don't know. Okay, let me see. And then he goes through like specific people that he's seen and are still sick, blah, blah, blah. It has this thing about you need to reinstate and redo your taper, and that is just crazy. And then using like all of the expletives, F this, F that, you're an F and MF, and like all of that. Like I got that too from him. It's not, some people do actually have emotional mental issues. They might be in withdrawal as well, but he says if you don't stabilize after reinstating, you will be brain damaged like me. Okay. Let me see. And he goes on and on about, they are liars, blah, 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 blah. Okay. And then she was like, it was bad for reading all of these things. She almost threw up and cried all day. The uncertainty is bad enough. And then the few people who have seen her videos. Okay, she sent a video, a lot of like twitching and facial movement in that. Says it is hard to have faith when you are in intense suffering 24/7. No one is like you and comments above or what you have, and that's why you can't ask people all these things. You can't take to heart most of what's in these forums. You just cannot do it. I almost read nothing from the forums after a while, except anything I could find that was positive. And sometimes in my search for positive things and success stories, I found negative things, and they would absolutely freak me out. Okay. She says, I want to believe Baylissa, but then I see all of this. I often wondered if the clients she has were representative of what is on these groups, or are we in two different worlds, bad and really, really bad? Okay, bad and really, really bad. Okay, there you're judging by the symptoms. The damage that is done to us is essentially the same thing. We are all fighting the same actual kind of damage. And there is some uncertainty in that there is at least downregulation of GABA neuroreceptors, at least that. But I'm sure there are a few other things going on too. That's the beginning of it, and then it kind of branches out to a few other things. But it's all of these things. We have all sustained the same damage, injury, okay? But we express it differently with symptoms. That's all. And some symptoms are nastier than others. In particular, I mean, the biggies are akathisia is a very nasty one. That's a hard one. The black depression, fear, anxiety, very, very hard. Different kinds of, like burning can be difficult. Tics and facial movements and movements of the body, like where you're twitching involuntarily. It just happens. It's disturbing. It really is. And if you don't have like the mental stuff, but you have all this physical stuff, that kind of wears you down mentally too. It does, because like, well, this isn't like my brain's messed up. This isn't normal to feel these feelings and for these movement things to be happening. And that plays on your brain too, your thoughts and your emotions. But you have to remember, we all have sustained the same sort of damage, but we express it differently. We heal differently according to different time frames. So, okay, she continues, there is no group of healed people to come back and give hope except Baylissa and you. Okay, and it would be wonderful if people would come back and give hope. It really, really would. I wish we had a group of people to do that. But I understand, a lot of people in withdrawal, they've lost a lot. Some of them have lost everything. And it's important that when they're healed, they go back out and they have to make a life again. They have to do what they need to do to continue to live in a reasonable way. So in some ways, I have a luxury. I'm retired. I can do this. Baylissa, like, she has the degree and I guess the license or whatever, and she can do this too as part of her job. But it's hard when there aren't that many people who have healed hanging around. Okay, 33. I still got the second email here from her. She says, I had to add these also. Okay, these are just some quotes. Says, you don't want to kindle yourself, especially if you've been off for months and months and months. That's a whole nother level of hell you don't want to see. Each time you go on and off, it just becomes harder and harder and can be absolutely catastrophic. Okay, and that's true. Like, each time you come off, it's harder. It's not impossible. I see most people are kindled. I think they come off and then a lot of times too fast or cold turkey, and then they realize I can't sustain this agony, this misery, and they go back on. So they have kindled themselves in a way there, depending on how long it is they waited to reinstate. But if you've been off a really, really long time, most of the time what I've seen is reinstatement does not help. I've seen people do it. I've seen people be off for quite some time. They go back on, and maybe the first little while their symptoms aren't nearly as bad, but then it all returns. That's the way it was for me when I quit drinking. I was on my 1 milligram Klonopin, and then I thought, well, I need more Klonopin that will, and then I'll taper off of the bigger dose. Well, it was good for like one night. I slept really like a baby the first night, and after that it just made my depression much, much blacker. So yeah, reinstating often is not, after you've been off a long time, is not typically the best thing to do. And I know it's hard, like when you've been off a long time and you're still in misery, but it's the rock and hard place. You just, you got to go forward, and I know it's really, really hard. And I was in that place. I really was. Let me see. I had to cold turkey in order to save my life. The tapering just wasn't working for me. Okay, and she says this may be true for me too, because she's been trying to get off of, I think she's on Klonopin right now. She had been on Ativan. Okay, that in a sense, that's the way it was for me too. I came off of the 4 milligrams cold turkey in the hospital, but then I had to reinstate when I got home to 1 milligram, which I took for years. And it took me a while to realize I had to get off of the 1 milligram, but I came off relatively fast. It wasn't a cold turkey. It was in 3 months I did it, but it turned out I came off as fast as I could without like having a seizure or going into really super acute withdrawal the way I had from the cold turkey in the hospital. I think sometimes, and a lot of people would argue, sometimes like if you're in really bad tolerance, especially while you're on it, you kind of like bite the bullet and maybe try to go as fast as you can. I didn't really feel the cuts all that much. The bottom didn't fall out until I was a month off, and then it got bad. But I don't know, we're all different. You kind of gotta, there is no set plan. Even for me, I kind of just stumbled my way through, and fortunately or blessedly or whatever word is the right word, I stumbled and made it through. I made it. So that there is no, a lot of times when you start with a plan, you have to modify it as you go. Okay, now this is a nasty quote here. The quote is, "I've been hiding my symptoms and length of time from others so as not to upset anyone that not all people heal from this." I don't know why you would even say that. Kind of like pretending like you're well when you're not. And I don't know the specifics for this person, but probably they have healed a good bit, but they still have symptoms. And I've always said, I have certain physical symptoms too. They have not all disappeared. The stuff, I can live life. I have a happy life. I have a good life. But there are some symptoms. It would be nice if they were gone, like the ringing ear. It'd be nice if that would like at least, subside a little bit and fade. And sometimes it does, but it's there. It's just there. And I think one of the problems is we all want to heal absolutely completely, have no residual, no vestige of any symptom ever again. And I don't know if that means 100% healing or not. I'm not sure. I'll talk a little bit more about that then. Let me see. Okay. I'm sure many other illnesses and years have been taken off of people's lives because of this withdrawal. How can you be sure of that? I guess meaning like they have gotten other illnesses, and their lives have been shortened, I guess. Yeah, because of benzo withdrawal. I don't know how you can even make such a statement. That's completely unprovable. There is no evidence for that. How can you be sure of that? Could suspect it maybe, but you can't be sure of that. That obviously was written by someone who, I don't even know what they're, I don't know. I have no idea who wrote that. It's a ridiculous statement. But you have a lot of people, I've noticed, especially with YouTube videos of people who are in withdrawal, who maybe have gotten well. You get people on there that just make some of the most, they're just mean and nasty. They're not looking to give any positive input. They're just trying to inflict pain and damage. And our society has become more and more like that. That's why it's so, you got to be really careful with these groups and things that you see, because people just post. A lot of times I think they see how mean they can be. I don't know. Okay, the next one. It's been 5 years since me and a few others have been on Benzo Buddies. We now only discreetly talk outside of Benzo Buddies, as we are not fully healed and don't want to use the forum to be criticized or be criticized. Okay. Okay, so I guess they're saying they haven't. I don't know. They're not fully healed, so that they don't come back and talk about it on Benzo Buddies. But yet that's what they have just done. That's what they have just done. I think if more people, I would love to talk to people who have healed. I mean, sit down with them and ask them some. I mean, if I had a whole group of them together, I would sit down with a questionnaire. I would type up a questionnaire and start asking them questions, because I want to know a lot of things too. I want to know about, like, so every single symptom you ever had is gone. How about this? How about this? How about this? Because we're not going to get to the bottom of this until people tell the absolute truth. That's not going to happen. And all that happens is we scare the crap. People come back and scare the crap out of other people that are still in it. Or people who are in it who are sick scare the crap out of other people who are still sick. I mean, how can you have to understand, most of the people in these forums and on these groups are still sick. Okay, so their opinion is tainted just because of that. Why don't you get a job and stop acting like a victim? That speaks for itself. Okay. Let me see what else I have. Okay, I have a list of all the research articles that state this, and this is happening. Nobody knows. Nobody knows. That's the problem with this. There is no certainty. The only thing I have seen so far that I think is even close to what is actually happening, what is going on here, is the work of Dr. Eugene Lipov in Chicago. And I don't even think he knows exactly what he has presented is very plausible. I was in withdrawal. I remember how it felt. It's extremely plausible, but I think you can add to it. And I've never heard anyone else put forth anything remotely resembling that. It's almost like nobody wants to know. Or nobody cares enough to figure this out. Okay, another quote. Professor Heather Ashton, stated that 20 to 25% of people may very well be permanently damaged. Why not 10 to 15? Why not 1 to 5%? There's no way to know. Can someone get permanently damaged from anything? Absolutely, absolutely. We don't know enough to make such statements. We just don't. You can say based on observation. I've observed this group of people for this many years. These people are still struggling with certain kinds of symptoms. They obviously are not completely symptom free. And then make some sort of statement about that, but you can't say they will never heal. They probably are never going to heal. You can't really say that. Let me see. Okay, there's just more kind of comments like that. She's a lot of comments here. I said, Dawn, it's amazing that my cognition is so bad, but yet I can recall every single one of these comments. They are seared into my memory, and they repeat over and over and over. All day long and night, it never stops. You have no chance. You are worse than them. I had that too. I had it. Honestly, I did. Mine was the depression. I thought I was the most depressed person who had ever gone into withdrawal. I believed that. To me, it was like a fact. It really, really was. But in withdrawal, we remember. The funny thing is, I could read a post that was like 99.5% positive and good and uplifting, but it was that 1/2% that I would think about. It would just play over and over in my head. That's the way I was, and that's the way just about everybody is. And when I got well, and I tried to make sure when I wrote things, because all I did at first was write posts for Dr. Jennifer's blog, I would try to make sure every single word that you could not misconstrue it into something negative. But that's what we do in withdrawal. We fear the negative, and so anything that could possibly be descriptive of something negative, we would turn it that way. Let me see. You know how we go on forums to get validated with symptoms. Well, I put my toe in another venue and you saw the response. Never saw someone like you, but Baylissa has. I have too. I honestly have. It's not everyone gets those sorts of symptoms, but some people do. There are people. Okay, and then she says about, like, you know, Dr. Jennifer and Baylissa and me and Beacon of Light. You know, Baylissa is confident of the healing process, and so am I. I am. That was the one thing in my withdrawal. I knew I was healing, even though I couldn't feel it for so very long. Okay. Now, a lot of these people, I wrote a few notes here, and I'm going to be really going along. Oh, wow, I'm at 45 minutes. These people generally, to me, they have not accepted where they are, and they have no hope. A lot of them that wrote these things. And I think a lot of times when people get into that state, especially the one individual, I didn't even read anything that he wrote. You can't accept where you are. You blame it on everyone else, you know, except yourself. I mean, and it's not a blame game. That's not what it's about. Acceptance of where you are and what you have to do. And then you have to have hope too. You have to accept where you are. You have to have hope. And people who have, like, given up, they haven't accepted it, and they got no hope. And I guess they don't want other people to have hope too, so they suck the hope out of everybody else for some big reason. And that has to do with bitterness. That's a spiritual thing. That's a big spiritual problem. Like when you start doing stuff like that. I can remember when I was in withdrawal, people getting windows, you know, and I would be jealous, and people starting to get well, and I would be jealous. But I felt it helped me. I knew they were getting well. Okay, it wasn't a matter of like, well, I'm never going to be well. I'm going to bring everyone else down. You just, you know, you want the best for everyone else, and you want to get well yourself. But some people just, they get bitter, they blame everyone else, and they start making ludicrous statements, mean statements, dropping the F-bomb all over the place. And there were the one particular individual that she mentioned. Yeah, I've seen that, but he's got a spiritual problem and other things too. There are other things going on in his life. And to get back to this real quick, two brains. It's like we have two brains. We have the primitive reptilian brain, the amygdala, and that part, the inner part of your brain. That's the fight or flight part. Kind of like I think of like reptiles and dinosaurs and that, like way back in, like, you see the movies and stuff about like the ages past. Kind of like the eat or be eaten kind of mentality, or kill or be killed. So I think the thought is they were in a constant state of extreme vigilance, the reptiles. It's like eat or be eaten, you know, like simply they wanted to survive. That was it. And I think that's like the amygdala, that part of the brain. It's the survival part. And that's the emotions too, I think, have that, the emotional part of us probably is controlled too by that part of the brain. So that's one part. Okay, that's the fight or flight. That's the eat or be eaten. That's vigilance, super vigilance, which is what we have in withdrawal. And I think, you know, it is the amygdala and the sympathetic nervous system that have been injured in our response to the trauma caused by the drugs. But then you got the cerebral cortex, the other part of the brain around the amygdala and those particular areas of the brain. It's the outer layer of the cerebellum, the cerebral cortex. And it's composed of the gray matter, like the folded gray matter. Like when you look at a brain, that's what you see. It has a role in consciousness, like thinking, mental processes. And I think that is the part where the rewiring occurs. So you have like the amygdala part, it's injured, but then you have the rewiring, the consciousness part of your brain. That's the part that's rewiring, trying to get around all of the stuff that the amygdala is and the sympathetic nervous system are creating, all of those problems. And I think that's why it rewires the best way it can, without actually knowing how to repair what's going on in the amygdala and the sympathetic nervous system. So in many ways, I think maybe that the damage of the amygdala and sympathetic nervous system maybe hangs around a lot longer, and maybe it never, I don't know, maybe that injury, like you can't, I don't know what would happen there if you don't do something to get rid of what is causing it. And I've talked about like the nerve growth factor and all that stuff before. I won't get into that, but so I think it is like kind of like we have two brains. We have the cerebral cortex, which is the part that's suffering, it's rewiring, and you got the amygdala that's scaring the crap out of the cerebral cortex. So you got like the consciousness part, and then you got the survival part, and they're kind of like at odds with each other, and that's the problem, I think. Anyway, I've gone on like really, really long here. It's way too long. It's over 50 minutes, so I'm going to put an end to this. Thursday, I'm going to go out tonight and have a nice meal and get Eli bus duty. Hopefully he had a good day, and things will be good there. But so I hope you have a nice rest of the day, and maybe the next one I'll only make a few minutes long since this one's so long. As always, I'm right here, and I will be right here. Bye-bye.